The storm cellar door creaked open at midnight, and Harrison Tucker found himself staring down the barrel of his own Winchester at a pair of terrified green eyes peering up from behind a stack of canned preserves. "Don't shoot," came a hoarse whisper from the darkness below. "Please, I mean no harm." Harrison had lived alone on his small ranch outside Laramie, Wyoming for 3 years now, ever since he'd saved enough money working cattle drives to buy the land. At 26, he'd grown accustomed to solitude, to the quiet rhythm of tending his horses and fixing fences. But tonight, something had woken him, a sense of wrongness, a disturbance in the usual sounds of the prairie night. He'd grabbed his rifle and lantern, checking the barn first, then the smokehouse, and finally the cellar where he kept his winter stores. He hadn't expected to find a woman. "Come on up where I can see you," Harrison said, keeping his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Slowly now. The figure emerged inch by careful inch, rising from the cellar like something from a dream. Even in the weak lantern light, Harrison could see she was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with dark auburn hair tangled around her shoulders. Her dress was torn in several places, mud-stained and damp from what must have been days of hard travel. But it was her face that struck him most. Beautiful, yes, but marked by a desperation so profound it made his chest tighten. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I had nowhere else to go. I've been running for 5 days. I saw your cellar door yesterday evening and I just needed somewhere to hide, somewhere safe." Harrison lowered the rifle slightly but didn't set it aside. Living this far from town meant trusting your instincts, and right now his instincts were at war. She looked harmless, terrified even, but he'd heard too many stories of cons and tricks. "Running from what?" he asked. The woman's eyes darted past him, scanning the darkness beyond the circle of lamplight. Her whole body trembled, though whether from cold or fear, Harrison couldn't tell. "From men who want me dead. Men who killed my father and brother 2 weeks ago in Cheyenne City." "Why would anyone want to kill your family?" She wrapped her arms around herself, swaying slightly on her feet. For a moment Harrison thought she might collapse right there in front of him. "Because my father witnessed something he shouldn't have. A murder. A prominent man in Cheyenne City shot his business partner over a land dispute, and my father saw the whole thing through an office window. When he tried to go to the sheriff, he learned too late that the sheriff was in the killer's pocket." Harrison studied her face, looking for signs of deception. He found none, only exhaustion and genuine terror. "What's your name?" "Lily Ferguson," she said. "And I know how this looks. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I swear on my mother's grave everything I'm telling you is the truth. They came to our house at night. They shot my father in our front room. My brother Thomas tried to fight them off, and they killed him too. I only escaped because Thomas told me to run, to use the back door while he held them off." Her voice cracked on her brother's name, and tears began streaming down her face. "I've been moving at night, hiding during the day. I traded my mother's locket for a ride on a freight wagon that got me as far as the edge of your property. I saw your place, and I just thought maybe I could rest for a few hours in your cellar before moving on. I swear I was going to leave before you even knew I was here." Harrison made a decision that would change the course of his life. He lowered the rifle completely and set it against the side of the house. "Come inside. You look like you haven't eaten in days." Lily's eyes widened. "You believe me?" "I haven't decided yet," Harrison said honestly. "But I'm not going to leave a woman standing out here in the cold, whatever the truth might be. Come on." He led her into his small cabin, a simple 2-room structure with a main living area that served as kitchen and sitting room and a bedroom in the back. He'd built most of it himself, and while it wasn't fancy, it was solid and warm. He gestured to a chair near the fireplace and set about stoking the dying embers back to life. Lily sank into the chair as if her legs could no longer support her weight. In the better light of the cabin, Harrison could see more details. Her dress had once been fine, the kind a merchant's daughter might wear. Her hands, though dirty, were not calloused from hard labor. Everything about her suggested she was telling the truth about her background. He pulled out the leftovers from his dinner, cold venison and biscuits, and set them in front of her along with a cup of water from his pitcher. She fell on the food like a starving animal, then seemed to catch herself and forced herself to slow down. "Thank you," she said between bites. "You're very kind." "Don't mistake caution for kindness just yet," Harrison said, though his tone was gentler than his words. He sat down across from her, studying her in the firelight. "Tell me everything, from the beginning." So she did. Her story spilled out between bites of food, a tale that made Harrison's blood run cold. Her father, Michael Ferguson, had owned a successful dry goods store in Cheyenne City. He'd been considering expanding, looking at properties, when he'd gone to discuss a potential lease with a lawyer named Richard Donnelly. While waiting in the outer office, he'd seen through a window into Donnelly's private office. There, Donnelly had argued with his partner, a man named James Hartwell, over the division of profits from their shared properties. The argument had escalated, and Donnelly had pulled a derringer and shot Hartwell in the chest. Michael had fled before Donnelly saw him, but by the time he reached the sheriff's office, Donnelly had somehow gotten there first. The sheriff, a man named Carson who owed Donnelly numerous favors and possibly bribes, had convinced Michael that reporting the murder would be signing his own death warrant. Donnelly was too well connected, too powerful, better to keep quiet and stay alive, but Michael Ferguson had a conscience. He'd struggled with the decision for 2 days before finally deciding he had to do the right thing, had to testify to what he'd seen. He'd planned to travel to the territorial capital to report the crime to authorities there, beyond Carson's influence. He never got the chance. "They came at night," Lily said, her voice hollow with remembered horror. 4 men. My brother and I heard the shots. Thomas grabbed Father's hunting rifle and told me to run. I heard more gunshots as I fled through the back door. I wanted to stay, wanted to help, but Thomas had made me promise that if anything ever happened, I would survive. That I would get away and tell the truth about what happened. And these men have been hunting you ever since," Lily nodded. "I've seen them twice. Once in a small town between Cheyenne City and here, and once 3 days ago when I was hiding in a barn. They're asking questions, showing people my description. They won't stop until they find me." Harrison stood and paced to the window, looking out at the dark prairie. His ranch was isolated, a good 5 miles from the nearest neighbor and 15 miles from Laramie proper. If men came looking here, he'd see them coming, at least in daylight, but it also meant he was alone in facing whatever might come. Why not go to the law? He asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Because I don't know who I can trust. If the sheriff in Cheyenne City is corrupt, how do I know the sheriff here isn't as well? Men like Donnelly have long reaches. And even if I found an honest lawman, what proof do I have? My father is dead. The only witness to what he saw is gone. It's just my word against a powerful man's denial." She had a point. Harrison had seen enough of the world to know that justice wasn't always just, especially when money and influence were involved. The Wyoming Territory in 1882 was still rough country, still a place where the right bribe or the right threat could make the law look the other way. He turned back to face her. "So what were you planning to do? Keep running forever?" "I don't know," Lily admitted, and the defeat in her voice was painful to hear. I hadn't thought past staying alive for one more day. I have no family left, no friends I could turn to without putting them in danger. I suppose I thought maybe I could make it to California, find work somewhere under a different name, try to start over. California is a long way off. You'd never make it on foot. I know. She set down her empty plate and met his eyes. I know my chances aren't good, but what else can I do? If I stop running, they'll find me. And when they do, they'll kill me, just like they killed my father and brother. Harrison found himself believing her. Everything in her manner, her story, the details that rang too true to be fabricated, convinced him she was telling the truth. And something else stirred in him too, something he hadn't felt in a long time. A desire to protect, to help, to stand between this frightened woman and the evil pursuing her. "You can stay here," he heard himself say. "At least for a while, until we figure out what to do." Lily stared at him in disbelief. "You would do that? Risk yourself for a stranger? My father once told me that a man's character is defined by what he does when no one is watching," Harrison said. "And more importantly, by what he does for people who can't repay him. I don't have much, but I have a spare room and enough food to share. You can rest here, recover your strength, and we'll work out a plan." Fresh tears spilled down Lily's cheeks, but these were different from before. "I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "Then don't say anything, just get some rest. You look like you're about to fall over." Harrison moved toward his bedroom. "You take the bed, I'll sleep out here by the fire." "I couldn't take your bed," Lily protested. "You can and you will. I've slept in worse places." He pulled a blanket from a chest and arranged it near the fireplace. "There's a wash basin in the bedroom and clean clothes in the dresser. They'll be too big, but they're better than what you're wearing. We can burn that dress tomorrow." Lily stood slowly, still unsteady on her feet. She started toward the bedroom, then paused and turned back. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me. You have no reason to believe my story or put yourself in danger for me." Harrison considered the question. He could have given her the answer about his father and character, but that wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was more complicated, more instinctive. From the moment he'd seen her terrified face in his cellar, something had shifted in him. Maybe it was loneliness, maybe it was something deeper. He didn't fully understand it himself. "Because it's the right thing to do," he finally said. "And because no one should have to face what you're facing alone." She held his gaze for a long moment, something passing between them that neither could name. Then she nodded and disappeared into the bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. Harrison lay down on his makeshift bed, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind raced with thoughts of Lily Ferguson and her story, of the danger that might be heading his way, of the decision he'd just made. He'd always thought of himself as a careful man, not given to rash choices or unnecessary risks. Yet here he was, sheltering a fugitive and potentially painting a target on his own back. But as he lay there in the darkness, listening to the soft sounds from the bedroom as Lily finally found rest, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Something about her had reached past his defenses, past his careful caution. Something that felt like the beginning of something important. The next morning, Harrison woke to the smell of coffee. He sat up, momentarily confused, then remembered the events of the previous night. He found Lily in his small kitchen area, dressed in one of his shirts which hung nearly to her knees, and a pair of his trousers rolled up and cinched with a piece of rope. Her hair was wet, freshly washed, and hung in dark waves down her back. "I hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing to the coffee pot. "I found your supplies and thought I should make myself useful." "I don't mind at all." Harrison stood and stretched, aware that he probably looked rough. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks." "Your bed is much more comfortable than a cellar floor or a pile of hay." She poured him a cup of coffee and handed it to him. I've been thinking about what you said last night about figuring out a plan. I have an idea, but you might not like it. Harrison took a sip of the coffee, strong and hot, exactly how he liked it. I'm listening. We need to get proof of what Donnelly did. Real proof, something that can't be ignored or explained away. And we need to take it to someone in authority who's beyond his influence. And how do you propose we do that? Lily set down her own cup and leaned against the rough wooden counter. Donnelly's partner, the man he killed, he had a wife. Sarah Hartwell. I knew her slightly. She was always kind to me when she came into my father's store. If anyone might have evidence of Donnelly's wrongdoing, it would be her. Letters, business documents, something that could prove motive or corruption. That's assuming she has anything. And even if she does, how would we get it? We can't just walk back into Cheyenne City and knock on her door. No, but we could write to her, carefully, without revealing where I am. If she has anything that might help, she might be willing to send it. Lily's expression was determined despite the fear Harrison could still see in her eyes. I know it's a long shot. But it's better than just hiding forever or running away without ever seeking justice for my father and brother. Harrison considered this. It was risky, but then again, everything about this situation was risky, and he had to admit that Lily's idea had merit. Running might keep her alive in the short term, but it was no way to live. Always looking over her shoulder, always afraid, never able to put down roots or use her real name. And beyond that, if what she said about Donnelly was true, the man deserved to face justice. All right, he said. We'll try it, but we do it carefully. No mention of where you are, no details that could be traced back here, and we wait to see what she says before making any other moves. Lily's face lit up with the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her features, revealing a beauty that went beyond her physical appearance. There was strength in that smile, resilience, a spirit that hadn't been broken despite everything she'd endured. Over the next few days, they settled into an unexpected routine. Harrison went about his work tending the horses and maintaining the ranch, while Lily helped where she could. She proved to be a hard worker despite her merchant-class upbringing, helping with cooking and mending and other domestic tasks. They composed the letter to Sarah Hartwell together, laboring over every word to make sure it was both clear enough to be understood and vague enough to protect Lily's location. During the long evenings, they talked. Harrison found himself sharing things he rarely spoke about. His childhood in Missouri, his parents who died of fever when he was 17, his years working cattle drives to save money for his own place. Lily told him about growing up in Cheyenne City, her mother who died when she was 12, her close relationship with her brother Thomas. He was 3 years older than me, she said one night as they sat by the fire. Always protective, always looking out for me. When Mother died, he stepped up and helped Father raise me. He taught me to ride, to shoot, to stand up for myself. Her voice caught. The last thing he ever said to me was, "Run, Lily. Don't look back. Survive." Harrison reached out and took her hand without thinking. It felt natural, right? You honored him by doing exactly that. She squeezed his hand in return, and something passed between them, a connection that went beyond mere companionship. Harrison found himself noticing little things about her. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the sound of her laugh when he told a funny story about a particularly stubborn horse, the gentle competence of her hands as she worked. He was falling for her, he realized with a start. Despite the circumstances, despite the danger, despite knowing her for less than a week. It should have frightened him, this sudden intensity of feeling. Instead, it felt inevitable, as if she'd been meant to walk into his life, or climb down into his cellar as the case may be. On the 8th day after Lily's arrival, Harrison rode into Laramie to post the letter and pick up supplies. Laramie in 1882 was a growing town, boosted by the transcontinental railroad that ran through it. The streets bustled with activity. Freight wagons, riders, people going about their business. Harrison kept his eyes open, watching for any sign of men asking questions or looking out of place. But he saw nothing suspicious. At the post office, he mailed the letter to Sarah Hartwell, addressing it to her home rather than any business location where it might be intercepted. Then he headed to the general store for flour, sugar, and other necessities. He was loading his purchases into his saddlebags when a voice called out behind him. "Harrison Tucker, haven't seen you in town for a while." He turned to find Sheriff Daniel Morrison approaching. Morrison was a decent man in his 50s, with a weathered face and honest eyes. Harrison had always gotten along well with him, but now, with Lily hiding at his ranch, he felt a spike of nervousness. "Been busy with the horses," Harrison said casually. "Spring's always a hectic time." "I hear that." Morrison paused, then said in a lower voice, "Say, you haven't seen any strangers around your way, have you? Men passing through asking questions." Harrison's heart rate increased, but he kept his expression neutral. "Can't say that I have. Why? Something wrong? Maybe nothing. But a couple of men came through town 3 days ago, well-dressed types from Cheyenne City. They were asking if anyone had seen a young woman, auburn hair, green eyes, traveling alone. Said she was wanted for theft, that she'd stolen money from her employer before running off. So they'd reached Laramie. Harrison felt a chill run down his spine. "Can't help you there, Sheriff. I haven't seen anyone matching that description." Morrison studied him for a moment, and Harrison forced himself to meet the sheriff's gaze steadily. Finally, Morrison nodded. "All right then. Just thought I'd ask, you being out that way and all. If you do see anything unusual, you'll let me know, of course." Harrison finished loading his supplies and rode back toward his ranch, his mind racing. The men hunting Lily had reached Laramie, and they were lying about why they wanted her, claiming she was a thief rather than a witness to murder. That suggested they were being careful, trying to use the law to help them find her rather than operating entirely outside it. It was clever and more dangerous in some ways. He needed to tell Lily, needed to make sure she was even more careful about staying hidden. His ranch was isolated enough that casual visitors were rare, but if someone decided to search all the outlying properties, they might eventually reach his door. When he arrived home, he found Lily in the small garden plot behind the cabin, pulling weeds from between the rows of vegetables. She looked up at his approach, smiling, then saw his expression and immediately sobered. "What happened?" He dismounted and told her everything, watching the color drain from her face. But to her credit, she didn't panic. She listened carefully, nodding, processing the information. "They're claiming I'm a thief," she said when he finished. "That's smart of them. It makes it seem like they're the victims, like they have the law on their side. We need to be even more careful now," Harrison said. "If anyone comes to the ranch, you'll need to hide. The cellar, or maybe in the loft of the barn where there's space behind some old tack." "I understand." She straightened, brushing dirt from her hands and Harrison's hands rather from his pants that she still wore. "Harrison, if this is too dangerous, if you want me to leave, I would understand. You've already done more for me than I had any right to ask." "You didn't ask," he pointed out. "I offered, and I'm not backing out now." She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she'd used that morning. Why risk all this for me?" Harrison looked into her green eyes, seeing the fear there but also the strength, the determination, the goodness that shone through despite everything she'd endured. And he knew that his answer to her question was different now than it would have been a week ago. "Because you matter," he said simply. Because what happened to you and your family was wrong, and someone needs to stand with you against that wrong. And because I'm starting to care about you, Lily. More than I probably should, given how short a time we've known each other. Her breath caught, and color rose in her cheeks. I care about you too. I've been trying not to, trying to tell myself that it's just gratitude or the circumstances or loneliness. But it's more than that. You're a good man, Harrison Tucker, better than any man I've ever known. They stood there for a long moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Harrison reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. We're going to get through this, he said. Together. I promise you that. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. I want to believe that. Then believe it. He withdrew his hand reluctantly, knowing that if he kept touching her, he might not stop, and that seemed too fast, too much given everything she was dealing with. Come on. Let's get these supplies inside and figure out our next steps. The days that followed were tense. Harrison rode the perimeter of his property regularly, watching for any sign of intruders. Lily stayed close to the cabin during the day, never venturing far from cover. They created signals, plans for what to do if someone approached unexpectedly. And they waited for a response from Sarah Hartwell, hoping the letter had reached her, and that she would reply. But despite the tension, or perhaps because of it, Harrison and Lily grew even closer. Their conversations deepened, moving beyond surface details to hopes and dreams, fears and regrets. They discovered shared values, similar views on life and what mattered most, and the attraction between them grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after Lily had first appeared in his cellar, they sat together on the porch as the sun set over the prairie. The sky was ablaze with orange and pink, the air finally cooling after a hot day. Harrison had brought out his harmonica and played a few soft tunes, simple melodies his father had taught him years ago. That's beautiful, Lily said when he finished. Where did you learn to play, my father? He said a man needed to know how to make music as well as how to work. That life was more than just survival, it had to have beauty too. Harrison set the harmonica down on his knee. I haven't played much since he died. Always seemed too quiet, too lonely to play just for myself. It's not just for yourself anymore, Lily said softly. I'm here. He turned to look at her, struck again by how right she looked sitting beside him on his porch, wearing his clothes, sharing his space. You are, and that's changed everything. She reached out and took his hand, weaving her fingers through his. The simple gesture felt momentous, an acknowledgement of what was growing between them. What are we going to do, Harrison? About this, about us? Even if we resolve the situation with Donnelly, even if we somehow get justice for my family, my life is still in ruins. I have nothing to offer you, no home, no money, nothing. You have yourself, Harrison said. That's everything. He shifted to face her more fully, his free hand coming up to cup her face. I know the timing is terrible. I know we've only known each other a short time, and that you're dealing with grief and fear and everything else. But I can't pretend I don't feel what I feel. I love you, Lily Ferguson. I think I started loving you the moment you whispered, please don't shoot from my cellar. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. I love you too. I didn't think I could feel anything but fear and sorrow after what happened, but you've given me hope. You've made me feel safe and cared for and valued. You've reminded me that there's still good in the world. Harrison leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted to, but she didn't. She met him halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. It was a first kiss that felt like a beginning, like the start of something that could last a lifetime. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Harrison rested his forehead against hers. Whatever comes, we face it together." "Agreed, agreed," she whispered. The next morning, Harrison rode into Laramie again to check for mail. His heart raced as the postmaster handed him a letter addressed in an unfamiliar feminine hand. It was from Sarah Hartwell. He waited until he was back at the ranch to open it, wanting to read it with Lily. They sat together at his small kitchen table, and he slit the envelope carefully. Inside was a single page of neat handwriting and a separate folded document. Sarah's letter was brief, but powerful. She wrote that she'd been horrified to hear what had happened to Lily's family, and that she'd suspected Richard Donnelly of foul play in her own husband's death, despite the official ruling that it had been suicide. She'd found her husband's personal journal hidden in his study, containing detailed entries about Donnelly's corrupt business practices, including bribery, fraud, and intimidation. The journal didn't directly mention Donnelly murdering James Hartwell, but it provided clear motive and established a pattern of criminal behavior. She'd made a copy of the relevant pages and was sending them to Lily, along with her own sworn statement about when and where she'd found the journal. She ended by saying that she hoped this would help Lily find justice, and that she was praying for her safety. Lily's hands shook as she read through the copied journal pages. They were detailed and damning, documenting Donnelly's various schemes over the course of several months. Combined with what her father had witnessed, it might be enough to bring Donnelly down. "This is incredible," she said, looking up at Harrison with tears in her eyes. "This is real evidence. This could actually work." "The question is, what do we do with it?" Harrison said. "We can't trust the local authorities in Cheyenne City, and I'm not sure about Sheriff Morrison here either. He seemed honest, but Donnelly's men have already been here spinning their story about you being a thief." Lily thought for a moment. What about the territorial governor? Or a federal marshal, someone whose jurisdiction is bigger than Donnelly's influence? "The territorial governor is in Cheyenne," Harrison said, referring to the city of Cheyenne, not Cheyenne City where Donnelly operated. "That's about 50 miles north of here. There's a federal marshal who comes through sometimes too, handles cases that cross county lines or involve federal crimes. How do we find out when he'll be here next? I can ask around in town, carefully." Harrison studied the documents spread out on the table. "But Lily, even if we get this to the right authorities, you'll have to testify. You'll have to come out of hiding and tell your story publicly. That means those men will know exactly where you are. I know." She straightened her shoulders, and Harrison saw the determination that had kept her alive through weeks of running and hiding. "But I can't hide forever, and my father and Thomas deserve justice. They deserve for the truth to be known. Then we do this right. We find out when the marshal will be in town, and we make sure you're protected when you go to him. I won't let anything happen to you." She took his hand across the table. "I know you won't. I trust you completely." Over the next few days, Harrison made careful inquiries in Laramie. He learned that a federal marshal named William Patterson was due to arrive in town in 10 days to investigate a mail robbery. Patterson had a reputation for honesty and competence, exactly the kind of man they needed. Meanwhile, Harrison began teaching Lily to shoot, figuring that if trouble came, she should be able to defend herself. They practiced behind the barn where the sound wouldn't carry far, using tin cans as targets. She proved to be a quick learner, her hands steady despite her nervousness. "Thomas taught me the basics," she explained after hitting 3 cans in a row, "but Father didn't approve, so we had to practice in secret." "Well, Thomas knew what he was doing. You're a natural." Harrison stood behind her, adjusting her stance slightly. The closeness was both practical and an excuse to touch her, something he found himself wanting to do more and more. She glanced back at him with a knowing smile. "You're a good teacher." "I have excellent motivation to make sure my student learns well," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. They spent their evenings planning for the meeting with Marshall Patterson, going over Lily's story, organizing the evidence, preparing for every possible question or challenge. But they also stole moments for themselves, sitting together watching the stars, sharing kisses that grew less tentative and more passionate as the days passed. One night, as they stood on the porch wrapped in each other's arms, Lily said, "What happens after? Assuming we succeed, assuming Donnelly is brought to justice and I'm safe. What then?" Harrison pulled back to look at her face in the moonlight. "What do you want to happen?" "I want to stay here," she said without hesitation. "With you, if you'll have me. I know I come with nothing, no dowry, no prospects, just a lot of baggage and trouble." "Yes," Harrison said immediately. "Yes to all of it. Stay here, marry me, build a life with me. I don't care about dowries or prospects, I care about you." She laughed, a sound of pure joy. Was that a proposal, Harrison Tucker? It was. Not a very romantic one, I'll grant you, but I mean every word. "Lily Ferguson, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said, pulling him down for a kiss. "Yes, absolutely yes." When they finally went inside that night, they didn't separate to different rooms as they had been doing. They came together in Harrison's bed, their love-making tender and passionate, a celebration of their love and their commitment to each other. Afterwards, lying in his arms, Lily felt a peace she hadn't known since before her father's murder. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Harrison replied, holding her close. "And I promise you we're going to have a good life together. A long, happy life." The days before Marshall Patterson's arrival passed in a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Harrison and Lily talked about their future, making plans for after everything was resolved. She wanted to start a small business in Laramie, maybe a dress shop or a bakery, something that would allow her to be independent while still being close to the ranch. Harrison loved the idea, loved that she wanted to build something of her own while being part of his life. Finally, the day came. Harrison dressed in his best clothes, and Lily wore a dress they'd purchased in Laramie on a previous trip, a simple blue cotton that brought out her eyes. They rode into town together, Harrison's rifle in its scabbard and his pistol on his hip, alert for any sign of trouble. Marshall Patterson was staying at the Laramie Hotel, a two-story building on the main street. He was a tall man in his 40s, with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Harrison had sent word ahead requesting a meeting, citing important testimony related to a murder case in Cheyenne City. They met in Patterson's room, away from public view. The marshal listened intently as Lily told her story from beginning to end, presenting the documents from Sarah Hartwell and answering his careful questions. Harrison watched Patterson's expression change from skepticism to interest to outrage as the full picture emerged. "This is serious," Patterson said when Lily finished. "If what you're saying is true, and these documents support that, Richard Donnelly is guilty of multiple crimes including murder, bribery of a law enforcement officer, and conspiracy. The problem is, Donnelly is well connected. Bringing him down won't be easy and it could be dangerous for you, Miss Ferguson." "I know," Lily said steadily, "but I have to try. My father and brother died trying to do the right thing. I need to finish what they started." Patterson nodded approvingly. "You're brave, young lady." "All right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to send these documents to the territorial governor and to my superior in the Federal Marshal Service. I'm going to recommend that formal charges be filed against Donnelly and Sheriff Carson for corruption and murder. In the meantime, I'm going to place you under federal protection. You'll stay here in Laramie where I can keep an eye on things, and I'll make sure those men hunting you are dealt with if they show up." "She's staying with me," Harrison said firmly. "At my ranch. We're engaged to be married." Patterson looked between them and smiled slightly. "I see. Well, Mr. Tucker, are you prepared to be part of this? Once word gets out that Miss Ferguson has come forward, there may be attempts to silence her or intimidate witnesses." "I'm prepared," Harrison said without hesitation. "Whatever it takes. Good man." Patterson stood and shook both their hands. "Give me your ranch location. I'll have deputies patrol that area regularly, and I'll send word as soon as I hear back from the authorities. With luck, we'll have Donnelly in custody within a few weeks." They left the hotel feeling lighter than they had in weeks. For the first time since this nightmare began, Lily had real hope that justice might prevail. But as they walked toward where they'd left their horses, Harrison spotted something that made his blood run cold. 3 men stood near the livery stable, and one of them was staring directly at Lily. Their eyes met, and the man's expression changed from casual interest to recognition. He grabbed his companion's arms and pointed. "Lily, walk calmly to the horses," Harrison said in a low voice. "Don't run. We're just going to mount up and ride away." But the men were already moving toward them, hands moving to their weapons. Harrison's mind raced. They were on a public street in broad daylight. Surely these men wouldn't try anything here. "That's her," one of the men shouted. "The Ferguson girl." "Stop her." People on the street turned to look. Sheriff Morrison emerged from his office, hand on his gun. "What's going on here?" "That woman is a thief," the lead man said, the same lie they'd been spreading. "She stole from Mr. Donnelly in Cheyenne City. We have a warrant for her arrest." "That's a lie," Harrison said loudly. "These men work for a murderer named Richard Donnelly. They're trying to silence Miss Ferguson because she's a witness to Donnelly killing his business partner." A crowd was gathering now, people drawn by the commotion. Sheriff Morrison looked confused, his gaze moving between the accusers and Lily. "I just came from speaking with Federal Marshal Patterson," Lily said, her voice clear and strong despite Harrison knowing she must be terrified. "He's handling my case. These men have no authority here." "Federal Marshal, you say?" Morrison's expression cleared slightly. He turned to the 3 men. "You boys have any actual paperwork, a real warrant?" The men exchanged glances, and Harrison could see them calculating. They'd been caught off guard by Lily's public revelation, by the presence of a federal marshal, by the crowd of witnesses. "We don't need to show you anything," one of them said. "We're taking her back to Cheyenne City to face justice." "You're not taking anyone anywhere," came a new voice. Marshal Patterson pushed through the crowd, his badge prominently displayed. "Miss Ferguson is under federal protection as a material witness in a murder investigation. Anyone who interferes with her will face federal charges." The 3 men looked at each other again. Harrison could see the moment they decided to back down, at least publicly. The lead man held up his hands in a placating gesture. "We didn't know about any federal investigation. We were just doing our job, following up on our employer's complaint about stolen money." "Then your employer can file a formal complaint through proper channels," Patterson said coldly. "Now I suggest you 3 leave Laramie today, and I'll be sending word to the authorities in Cheyenne City about your activities here." The men retreated, but not before the leader cast a long, meaningful look at Lily, a look that promised this wasn't over. Harrison moved closer to her, his hand on his gun, making it clear he wasn't going to let them near her. The crowd dispersed slowly, people murmuring to each other about what they'd witnessed. Sheriff Morrison approached Patterson, and the 2 lawmen spoke in low voices. Finally, Morrison nodded and turned to Harrison and Lily. "I apologize for any confusion, Miss Ferguson," he said. "I was told you were wanted for theft. I didn't know there was more to the story." "I understand, Sheriff," Lily said graciously. "They've been very convincing with their lies. Well, the truth is out now." Morrison glanced at Harrison. "You take care of your lady, Tucker. And if you see those men anywhere near your property, you send word immediately." "I will. Thank you, Sheriff." They rode back to the ranch in silence, both processing what had happened. The confrontation had been frightening but also liberating in a way. Lily's story was now public knowledge. The lies about her being a thief had been countered. She was under federal protection. Everything was moving forward, perhaps faster than they'd expected. "Are you all right?" Harrison asked when they finally reached the ranch. "I think so," Lily said, dismounting. "It was terrifying seeing those men again, but I'm also glad it happened in a way. Now people know the truth. Now I don't have to hide." Harrison pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "You were incredibly brave back there. I had you beside me. That made all the difference." She looked up at him. "I meant what I said about us being engaged. I want everyone to know. I want to marry you as soon as possible." "How about as soon as this is all settled? Once Donnelly is dealt with and you're truly safe, we'll have a proper wedding. Nothing fancy, but with our friends there, legal and binding." She smiled. "That sounds perfect." The next few weeks were tense but hopeful. Marshal Patterson worked quickly, and true to his word, he kept them informed of progress. The territorial governor had been appalled by the evidence and had ordered a full investigation. A team of federal marshals had traveled to Cheyenne City and arrested Richard Donnelly and Sheriff Carson. Other corrupt officials were being identified and charged. The case was building momentum, becoming one of the biggest corruption scandals in Wyoming Territory history. Harrison and Lily spent their days working on the ranch and planning their future. She helped him with the horses, proving to have a natural way with animals. They talked about expanding the ranch, maybe adding cattle, definitely building a larger house with room for the family they both wanted. One evening, about a month after Lily had first gone to Marshal Patterson, they received word that the trial date had been set. Lily would need to testify in Cheyenne, the territorial capital, in 6 weeks. It would be dangerous, but she'd be under heavy guard, and Patterson assured them that Donnelly's organization had been largely dismantled. Most of his hired thugs had scattered, unwilling to face federal charges. "I want you to come with me," Lily said to Harrison. "I know you have the ranch to run, but I need you there." "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," Harrison assured her. "We'll arrange for my neighbor to watch the place while we're gone. This is too important." As the trial date approached, they made another decision. They would get married before traveling to Cheyenne. That way, no matter what happened, they would face it as husband and wife. The wedding took place on a sunny June morning at the small church in Laramie. It was a simple ceremony attended by a handful of friends Harrison had made in the area, Marshal Patterson, who had become a friend, and Sheriff Morrison. Lily wore a cream-colored dress that she'd made herself, and Harrison wore his best suit. When the preacher asked if they took each other as husband and wife, their "I do" responses rang out clear and certain. At the small gathering afterward at the Laramie Hotel, friends toasted their happiness and wished them well. Looking around at the smiling faces, Lily felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Just 2 months ago, she'd been alone, terrified, hiding in a stranger's cellar. Now she was surrounded by people who cared about her, married to a man she loved with all her heart. Happy? Harrison asked, pulling her close for a dance as someone played a fiddle. "Happier than I ever thought I could be again," she said honestly. "You saved my life, Harrison, in every way that matters." "We saved each other," he corrected. "You gave me purpose, love, a future worth building." I was just existing before you came along. Now I'm truly living." They spent their wedding night at the hotel, a rare luxury, making love as husband and wife and talking late into the night about their dreams and plans. When they finally slept, wrapped in each other's arms, both felt a deep contentment and security. The journey to Cheyenne took 3 days, traveling with Marshal Patterson and 2 other federal marshals who provided security. The closer they got, the more nervous Lily became, but Harrison stayed close, his steady presence a constant comfort. The trial was a circus. The courtroom packed with spectators, newspaper reporters from across the territory, and the curious public. Richard Donnelly sat at the defendant's table looking defiant, his expensive lawyers arrayed around him. But when Lily took the stand and told her story in clear, unflinching detail, something shifted in the room. The jury listened intently. The judge's expression grew grimmer. She detailed what her father had witnessed, produced the journal pages from James Hartwell's widow, and withstood a brutal cross-examination from Donnelly's lawyers, who tried to paint her as a vengeful, unreliable witness with a grudge against their client. But Lily held firm, her testimony consistent and credible. Sarah Hartwell testified as well, dignified in her widow's black, speaking about her husband's fear in his final days and her own suspicions about his death. Other witnesses came forward too, people Donnelly had intimidated or bribed, now willing to speak out with federal protection. The trial lasted 5 days. When the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all counts, including murder, the courtroom erupted. Lily buried her face in Harrison's shoulder and cried, tears of relief and grief and vindication. Donnelly was sentenced to hang. Sheriff Carson received 20 years in prison. Other corrupt officials received various sentences. Justice, imperfect as it always was, had been served. "It's over," Lily said that night in their hotel room. "It's really over." "It is," Harrison confirmed. "You can rest now. You can grieve properly, and then you can move forward with your life, our life." "I still can't believe my father and Thomas are gone," she said softly. "I don't think I've fully processed it. I've been so focused on survival and justice that I haven't let myself really feel the loss." Harrison held her as she cried, finally grieving fully for the family she'd lost. He didn't try to fix it or minimize her pain. He just held her, offering his strength and love, letting her know she wasn't alone. They stayed in Cheyenne for another week, taking care of various legal matters. Lily inherited her father's business and property, though she decided to sell everything. Too many painful memories, and besides, her life was in Laramie now. With the money from the sales, they were able to make improvements to the ranch. They built a proper house, larger and more comfortable, with a real kitchen and multiple bedrooms for the children they hoped to have. They bought more horses and some cattle, expanding the operation. Lily opened a small bakery in Laramie, fulfilling her dream of having her own business, making the delicious bread and pastries her mother had taught her to bake. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm. The nightmares that had plagued Lily gradually faded. She learned to smile freely again, to laugh without reservation. Harrison watched her heal and flourish, falling more in love with her every day. A year after they married, Lily gave birth to their first child, a healthy boy they named Thomas Michael, after her brother and father. 2 years later came a daughter, Sarah Rose, named for Sarah Hartwell, who had helped them so much. And 3 years after that, another son, Daniel. The ranch prospered. Harrison proved to be a savvy businessman, and Lily's bakery became known throughout the county. They made friends, became pillars of their community, built a life that was full and rich and good. On warm summer evenings, they would sit on their porch and watch their children play in the yard. the Wyoming prairie stretching endlessly around them. Sometimes Lily would think back to that desperate night when she'd climbed down into a stranger's cellar, terrified and alone, with no idea that she was about to meet the man who would become her everything. "What are you thinking about?" Harrison asked one such evening, reading her expression. "About that night I hid in your cellar," she admitted. "About how different my life might have been if you'd turned me away." "I couldn't have turned you away," Harrison said, taking her hand. "Even then, something in me recognized something in you, like we were meant to find each other." "I believe we were." Lily squeezed his hand, watching their children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "Everything I lost, as terrible as that was, led me to you, to this life. And while I'll always grieve my father and Thomas, I'm also grateful for what I found. For you, for our children, for the love and peace and happiness we've built together." Harrison pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I love you, Lily Tucker." "I love you too," she whispered. "Forever." Young Thomas came running up to the porch, his face flushed with excitement. "Papa, tell us the story. Tell us how you and Mama met." Harrison and Lily exchanged amused glances. Their children never tired of hearing the tale, though they kept it appropriate for young ears, emphasizing the bravery and adventure rather than the danger and death. "Well," Harrison began, settling back in his chair as their 3 children gathered around, "it was a dark night, and I heard a noise coming from the cellar." As he told the story, sanitized for young listeners, Lily watched her family with a full heart. The little girl who had lost everything, the terrified woman hiding in a cellar, the brave soul who had fought for justice. She was all those people and more. But most importantly, she was Harrison's wife, their children's mother, a woman who had survived the worst and found her way to something beautiful. The sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The children eventually went inside to prepare for bed, and Harrison and Lily remained on the porch, hand in hand, content in the life they'd built from the ashes of tragedy. Marshall Patterson visited from time to time, always welcome at their table. He'd become something of an uncle to their children, bringing them candy and telling them stories about his adventures, carefully edited of course. Sarah Hartwell had remarried and moved to California, but she and Lily maintained a regular correspondence, 2 women bound by shared loss and triumph. As the years passed, the ranch continued to grow. Harrison taught young Thomas to ride and rope, passing on the skills he'd learned. Lily taught her daughter to bake and sew and all the domestic arts, but also encouraged her to be strong and independent. All 3 children grew up hearing stories about bravery and justice, about standing up for what was right even when it was hard. By the time Thomas turned 10, he could ride as well as his father. Sarah, at 8, was already helping her mother in the bakery on weekends, showing a natural talent for business. Daniel, at 5, was the ranch's official puppy wrangler, in charge of the working dogs that helped with the cattle. Harrison and Lily's love only deepened with time. They still stole moments together, still looked at each other with the same intensity and tenderness as those early days. Friends in town would sometimes comment on it, saying it was unusual to see a married couple so clearly devoted after so many years. "What's your secret?" One friend asked Lily one day at the bakery. Lily thought about it, her hands busy kneading dough. "We came together in crisis," she said finally. "We saw each other at our most vulnerable, our most afraid, our most determined, and we chose each other, not just once but every day since. We never take what we have for granted because we both know how easily it could have been different." It was the truth. Both of them carried the knowledge that their love story could have ended before it began. If Harrison had been less compassionate, if Lily had hidden somewhere else, if the men hunting her had found her before she reached safety, if the justice system had failed them. So many moments where everything could have gone wrong, but it hadn't. Against all odds, they'd found each other and built something lasting on their 10th wedding anniversary. Harrison surprised Lily with a trip back to Cheyenne City, the site of her greatest loss and greatest trauma. She'd avoided returning there since selling her father's property all those years ago. But Harrison thought it might be good for her to face those memories with him by her side. They visited the cemetery where her father and brother were buried. She'd paid for nice headstones with the money from selling the family business. She placed flowers on both graves and told them about her children, her life, her happiness. "I did it," she whispered, kneeling between the two graves. "I made sure Donnelly paid for what he did. I made sure your deaths weren't meaningless. And I built a good life, the kind of life you would have wanted for me. I hope you're proud." Harrison stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, giving her the space to grieve but making sure she knew she wasn't alone. When she finally stood, her eyes were wet but clear. "Thank you for bringing me here," she said. "I needed this closure." They spent the rest of their visit in Cheyenne visiting old friends, checking on the city's progress, and making new, happier memories to overlay the old, painful ones. By the time they returned to Laramie, Lily felt lighter, more at peace than ever. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Thomas grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day ranch operations. Sarah opened her own dress shop in Laramie, expanding the family's business interests. Daniel became a lawyer, determined to fight for justice like his parents had done. And through it all, Harrison and Lily remained the center of their family, the love story that started in a cellar on a desperate night becoming the foundation for generations to come. When they were both in their 60s, sitting on that same porch where they'd spent countless evenings, Harrison took Lily's weathered hand in his and said, "Do you remember what I told you that first night, after you climbed out of the cellar?" "You told me a lot of things that night," Lily said with a smile. "I told you that you mattered, that what happened to your family was wrong and someone needed to stand with you, and that I was starting to care about you." Harrison kissed her hand gently. "I should have added that I would spend the rest of my life thanking God that you chose my cellar to hide in." Lily laughed, the sound as bright as it had been when she was young. "I didn't choose it, really. It was dark, I was desperate, and it was the first safe place I found. Then I thank God for desperation and darkness and coincidence," Harrison said, "because they brought me you." As the sun set on another day, painting the Wyoming sky in brilliant colors, they sat together as they had for 40 years, their love as strong as ever, their life together a testament to courage, compassion, and the power of two people who chose each other against all odds. Their grandchildren played in the yard now, Thomas's 3 kids and Sarah's 2, with Daniel's first baby on the way. The ranch that Harrison had built alone had become a family legacy. The love story that started with a whispered plea from a dark cellar had blossomed into something that would echo through generations. And somewhere in the gathering twilight, if you listened carefully, you might hear the whisper of that original moment, that first meeting that changed everything. "Please, I mean no harm. Come on up where I can see you." Simple words that led to a lifetime of love. As darkness fell completely, and stars began to appear in the vast Wyoming sky, Harrison and Lily went inside their home, the home they'd built together, filled with memories and love, and the certainty that choosing each other that night had been the best decision either of them had ever made. Their story, which began in fear and desperation, had become one of hope, love, and the beautiful life that can emerge when two brave souls refuse to give up on justice, on trust, and on each other. The end of their story was really just another beginning, as their children and grandchildren carried forward the values they'd learned. Courage in the face of adversity, the importance of standing up for what's right, and above all, the transformative power of love. The woman who once hid in a cellar and the cowboy who found her there had created something that would last far beyond their own lives. A legacy of love that started with a whisper and grew into a song that would never truly end.